Yes, good. I'm sorry to interrupt the conversations, but there is a chance in a little while to continue those, because I know that's half the reason for the day. My name's Nick Temple. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of Social Enterprise UK. So a sort of belated welcome, and hope you've enjoyed the day and hope you've got a lot out of the session so far. It falls to me just to introduce this final session, introduce our final speaker of the day. And many of you know, really, Hazel Blears MP has been a huge supporter and advocate of all things kind of social enterprise for many years. Genuinely someone who works across sectors and also cross-party to make things happen. And I suppose uniquely, from my perspective, one of the few politicians who doesn't just talk about getting things done, but actually works a way to get them done, which is unfortunately still quite rare, but played a huge role in really kind of, we were just chatting about the amazing stuff that's happening in Salford, a big role in making kind of Salford a real thriving centre actually of best practice in social enterprise. So I'd like to invite Hazel up to give us a bit of a reflection on where we've come and hopefully a look forward to where this agenda can take us in future. So Hazel, cheers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that lovely, warm welcome this afternoon. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I thought, being the last person at the end of a full day's conference, I would have seen everybody putting their coats on and walking through the door. And it's amazing that you've all stayed so long. I don't for one moment think that's to listen to me. I think that's because you've enjoyed the day so much that you're buzzing with lots of ideas, networking, new projects you're going to do next week, next month, next year. You will have made so many relationships today, because that's what I always find on this agenda. Doesn't matter how many times I've been. Sometimes I meet the same people, they say different things. I meet different people, they say the same things. It's hugely reinforcing, because for many of us who've been on this journey, I've been on this journey probably for nearly 30 years now. It seems like a long time, and sometimes it feels as if you're pushing a boulder uphill, and then it keeps coming down on you. And just from time to time, you have that little crisis of confidence that thinks, have I made all this up? Is it really real? Does it have substance? Is it one of the biggest political and social movements that you've ever been part of? And just occasionally there's that moment of doubt in that, and you think, is it only me? Is it just kind of like a weird fringe of people who get this? And that I have to confess that there have been moments in my kind of political and activist career when it's actually felt like that, and it's been sometimes a bit of a lonely place occasionally, and maybe your group's got a bit smaller and you see the same people a bit more often in the same gathering, in the same place. And I was thinking that as I walked through the door today into Coin Street. And this is probably, I don't know, my 20th time in Coin Street for events, meetings, talking with people. And I think it's a really, really special place. And I'm delighted that we've had this summit here today, because many of you will know the history of this place from the 1970s, when it was a group of, I don't know, maybe they had sandals, maybe they had beards, probably. Not the women, but maybe quite a lot of them did. And it was that kind of place, but it had a core group of people who had a word we were just using, who had a passion for trying to do something to take over their own lives, and who were sick and tired of authorities of all kinds, of all political persuasions, telling them what they should do. And they realised that within themselves and within their own resources and within their friends and neighbours and the people who lived here, they actually had the power to make change. And when you have a movement like that started here at Coin Street, then you see what can be done. And they managed to get a bit of land from the GLC 30, 40 years ago. And from that, tiny acorn, then a huge organisation of passion has grown. And that's taken me all the way through my journey. And then when I was Secretary of State for Communities, I had the joy of making some quite big planning decisions about who should have a tall building in London and who should be able to get a tower block and who shouldn't. And you'll either like those decisions or you won't, whatever, but I had to make those big planning decisions. And one of them that came to me was for Coin Street. And I suppose I really should have excused myself from making a decision about that. But nevertheless, they wanted to be able to be really, really ambitious in their next phase of what they were going to do in terms of providing community facilities, housing, swimming pool, leisure facilities, all of that, and for it to be community owned and run in a social enterprise format. And I was so delighted we had to fight God, did we have to fight through officials, through planning inspectors, goodness knows what. But we managed to get that through. And I've just been talking to Colin now downstairs, and they've got a fabulous plan for providing extra care for frail elderly people, with a particular emphasis around people with dementia, which is probably the biggest global challenge we have, and my personal passion as well. And we've just downstairs, as I walk through the door, I think we've just done a deal about what I'm going to do to help him make it a reality. so for many of you, you'll have made commitments today. A bit like getting married, isn't it, really? Once you've got a partnership like that, you can't get away. So I think my association with Coin Street is going to remain. So first of all, can I say thank you for allowing me to make the final contribution today. I wish I could have spent the whole day, because I would be really, really energized. But I just wanted to start off by saying a big thank you, really, and I'm going to embarrass him, but that's to Adrian Ringrose, who's here from Interserve, because Adrian has been an amazing champion on this agenda. And I think one of the big things that's changed in the last 5-6 years or so is that this is an agenda now that isn't just about the social sector. It's not just about social enterprise. It's absolutely driven by social enterprise and the community sector. But you know, all these ideas that we've had so close to our heart for so long, business now gets it, or some parts of business really do get it. And I think that is a sea change, a step change into making this a mainstream agenda. Because I've always kind of been frustrated that social enterprise has always been seen as a niche, a kind of nice to have, a bit of icing on the cake. You know, once we've done all the big stuff, then we'll let the social enterprise come in and do the kind of bits around the edges, sometimes the bits that are too difficult for the mainstream. And to some extent, that's why the social enterprise and voluntary sector, in some ways, has stayed on the margins of the mainstream economy. And I think once you start to influence that mainstream of that economy, you can then almost see physically the way in which the ideas, the ways of working, the values, the extra impact that we can bring then becomes the norm. And I think probably the holy grail for most of us in this room is to see the social economy as actually the normal mainstream way we go about running our country, running our public services, running our businesses, and that's having a social mission at the heart of all of that. And it's really tantalizing. I don't know if you feel it, but it's really tantalizing. It feels like it's almost within reach. We're not there yet, we're not, but you know, if I was pushing that boulder uphill now, I think there's some kind of fulcrum at which we're approaching. And when we get the boulder on there, it'll go like that. And actually, we will become not absorbed into the mainstream economy, because I never want us to be that. I want us always to be challenging, creative, innovative, awkward, difficult, pushing, and really making change, because that's where our energy comes from. But I absolutely want to see an end to the days when this social sector was seen as marginal to the mainstream concerns of our country and our economy. And I think that that is absolutely where we're going. And that's due in no small measure to people like Adrian from Interserve, who has been, you know, you have to be brave on this agenda, because if you're not careful, Adrian, you know, the traditional economy will say to you that you've joined the ranks of the sandals and the beards and the kind of marginal economy. It's happening, I can see it before my eyes, but that's not true. And it's not just you, we've got Alison here from Wilmot Dixon as well. We've had a whole range of businesses. And it was about 3 years ago now when we first met. And I set up a group in response to my leader's speech about producers and predators, which is back in the news this week. And I thought, I don't want my party to be seen or perceived as being anti-business. And I knew that there were a lot of good businesses out there who wanted to do the right thing. So off my own bat, basically, I set up a group called Doing Good is Good Business. And that had businesses like Adrian's, but also local authorities, social enterprises within it. And the whole idea was to try and move from traditional notions of corporate social responsibility, painting a primary school, doing that kind of thing, into saying, why aren't businesses using their mainstream business model to do good? Through procurement, through recruitment, through product development, marketing. You know, they've got these big organizations. Why is the CSR department, you know, again, the add-on, the niche, the marginal, the nice to have? Why aren't we looking at the impact that you can make in a much bigger and sustainable way through doing good is good business? And then we began to see that there was an emerging evidence base, that if you're a good business, you have better brand loyalty, people want to use your goods and services. If you're a good business, you will attract the best talent. That evidence base is absolutely proven now, that this generation coming through of young people, they want a good wage, but actually they want to work for an organisation that they go home at night, they're proud to tell their mums and dads and their families, look, I work for them and this is their social mission, and isn't it fantastic what we do? So they're keeping the best talent. Fujitsu is one of these companies. They've taken on apprentices for the first time. They always used to take graduates. When they got the graduates, they had to Fujitsuize them. Now they take apprentices. The apprentices are more loyal because they feel they've been given a chance. And also, quite often, people at 16, 17 in the IT business are more creative, surprise, surprise, than by the time you've had it beaten out of you by going through a degree course at university. So they're finding that they've got much more innovation in their people they're recruiting, and now they've taken social enterprises and small businesses into their supply chain, and they're making a huge local impact with small organisations, which they never would have dealt with before, or they would have seen them as competitors rather than collaborators. So this whole kind of synergy for me is really the strength of where we're going. And that's why I think that this is not a flash in the pan. You know, I am an idealist and I am an optimist and I'm known for being an enthusiast, but I've been around long enough as well in politics, probably at every level, to know when you have a moment when there's an idea, that it's in communities, it's in politics, it's in business. And when you get that kind of coming together, you start to get traction and momentum. And when you get that, provided you've got enough kind of energy and push and drive with it, actually you can make a difference. And that, I genuinely believe, is the moment that we're all at in our various activities as we speak now. I wouldn't have thought 2 years ago when Chris White and I took the Social Value Act through Parliament as a tiny little kind of premature baby, a private member's bill. You know, you drop it once, it's dead, that's it, finished, over. And Chris and I nursed it through Parliament, through the House of Commons, House of Lords. All it takes is for one idiot member to stand up and say object, and you've lost your bill. And Chris and I had some opponents on what I would call a fairly unreconstructed kind of trade union agenda over here. And, social enterprises, privatisation by the back door, rubbish, in my view. And then we had some quite strange libertarian right-wingers over here who said anything that you do to put into procurement is a drag on the free market and therefore is anti-capitalist, so that's wrong as well. So Chris and I thought, well, we've got these nutters on this end and we've got these nutters on this end, so probably Chris and I are in the right space about speaking for the majority of the British people. So it was quite empowering, really, that we felt like that. We also had fantastic support from Nick Hurd, who was the Cabinet Office Minister. And, for most of you who've met Nick, I've worked on this agenda completely cross-party because he absolutely gets this. He understands it. He knows it's a big idea, and he knows it's about changing the society that we live in. So with his support, that was great to do that. I've seen 3 Cabinet Office Ministers so far in the last sort of few months, and I went in to see Rob Wilson recently. And again, I was encouraged by the fact that he's relatively new to this area, but absolutely gets the fact that the social economy can make a huge contribution to where we need to go in future, and particularly around the provision of public services. So I don't think this is going away. I really do not think it's going away. But I do think that we've got to be organised if we're going to make the most of what I think is quite a unique moment here. And that's why I'm really pleased that the Social Economy Alliance, absolutely led with the leadership of Social Enterprise UK, from Peter Holbrook, from Nick, from the whole organisation. For once, we've got organised. And we've got something like 50 different organisations signed up to the Social Economy Manifesto Ask. I've been trying to condense it from its current 10 pages, because having been chair of the party, I know that if you're lucky, you'll get half a page in a manifesto. And even if we just get some words that say social economy, social enterprise, social investment and social value in each party's manifesto, then after the election, whoever wins, the civil servants then will go through that manifesto and they will know this is part of the agenda. We're pushing as hard as we possibly can. We've got another meeting of the Alliance next week to look at that. I've sat down with every shadow minister, certainly on our side. I have also sat down with Oliver Letwin, and I have sat down with David Laws, so, above and beyond the call of duty, I'm perfectly happy to do this. And bless them, you know, they are keen to look at what we can actually get in the manifesto. And that is as well driven by pragmatic politics as much as anything else. We all know that whoever forms the next government, money is going to be really tight. That is just an economic reality for us. And therefore, unless we're prepared to think more creatively, particularly around the public service agenda, then we're not going to be able to either maintain or improve the services for the people who desperately need them and rely on them out there. You've been talking today about housing. You've got a number of really big housing associations here. You've been talking about health, the integration of health and social care with the involvement of the social enterprise sector, absolutely crucial and key around this. Procurement, getting a bigger bang for every bit of procurement we do, and making an impact about the way we buy things as well as what we actually buy. You know, all of this, to me, is just kind of like common sense, and any government who didn't snatch your hand off to have these opportunities would actually be foolish in the extreme. So, you know, we might call it the social economy. That might sound like fairly new language for some people, but the ideas that are underpinning this agenda are absolutely the way forward for us to make this happen. I just wanted to give a couple of examples, really. The Social Value Act, we've now had the review. I understand that you had Lord Young here this morning, talking with Adrian and with Victor Adebowale. Great champion for 30 years, Victor. I'm told that he didn't really reveal a great deal of what was in the review, and that's as it should be, Agnes, because Agnes is here from the Cabinet Office, keeping a beady eye on what I might be going to say next. But as I'm not a government minister, then I just think I have maybe a slightly more leeway on some of this. First of all, I was delighted to be asked by Lord Young to be part of the review. Very rare you get an opposition politician on a government review, and he's been very open and very inclusive. I think he was straight enough this morning to say that he came to this agenda as slightly a sceptic because his background was in small business and getting rid of bureaucracy, which he's done a good job with the very complicated PQQs and invitations to tender and all of that stuff around there. But as the weeks have gone on, I think that we've found a new advocate for us, certainly within the current government, because he's realised that the social value agenda is as much about getting value for money as it is about doing the nice things add-on. And once you get that realisation in somebody's head, that actually when money's tight, places like, for example, Birmingham Council, who are starting every one of their contracts from a position of 20% social value. I met their cabinet member a few weeks ago. They've got a cabinet member for commissioning contracts and improvement. You know, it sounds like the most boring job in the world, and he's amazing. He's an ex-railway officer. He's got a long grey beard. He drinks pints of tea, and he says to me, Hazel, there's not a contract in this council. And you think how big Birmingham is that goes anywhere without coming through me. And every one of my starting points is social value. And he's doing that because he cares, but he also knows that money's really tight in Birmingham. And unless he can get some extra value, he isn't going to be able to look after the poorest, the most vulnerable, the people who need his help and his support. And it's that kind of political commitment married with a hard economic head, which is an amazing combination. Sunderland, Durham, my local authority, Knowsley, Liverpool are doing fantastic things. Councillor Rose Jollett is like the most fantastic advocate for all of this. And again, once you get a critical mass of local authorities doing it, urban, rural, big, small, again, you're really kind of like moving on with this, more to do. I think the weakest link is central government, and I've been very robust about this in the review. If you think about the purchasing power of the NHS, of the MOD, who are doing good things with Landmark now in terms of getting social impact through employing veterans, they get it, they can see it helps them with their priorities. But right across central government, I think there is need for a huge push. And I'm hoping there'll be some things in the review about champions, about calling departments to account for how they're implementing social value. I personally would like to see the Prime Minister go into a cabinet meeting and look around the cabinet table and say to each one of his secretaries of state, I'd like a report in 4 weeks' time about what you're doing to implement the Social Value Act. Who knows? We might get there. We shall see. We might need to weigh in the help of Margaret Hodge from the PAC just to give it a little bit of push, but we'll see what we can do as well. That strikes fear into a few permanent secretaries' hearts, having to appear in front of Margaret, but nevertheless, I'm sure we can. So I think the review is never going to... shake the world at this stage because we're going into the election, so legislative promises are very difficult to bind any government to at this phase. But I think there's a very clear analysis in the review about the fact that we need to do more on awareness, because yes, we've got a lot of local authorities, we've got some good private businesses now, we've got social enterprises absolutely up for this. Central government needs to really push on and get this embedded in the system as the normal way of doing our business. I think there'll be some stuff also around consistency of practice, giving people assurance that yes, you can do this, you are not going to get legally challenged. In fact, the European Union procurement rules allow you to do it anyway. All that the Act does is put a duty on you, so it changes a power into a duty. But actually, all of the provisions legally are there for you, so hopefully a very can-do set of measures in the review to encourage people to have consistency around this. And perhaps also some stuff around the things that we talked about in our roundtable, Adrian: measurement, metrics, level playing field, transparency. If it gets measured, it gets done, and some stuff around that. So I hope people will find it's very positive. I'm not going to say any more about it now, just because I can see she's going pale at the gills there. But I think it will make a difference. So hopefully we get a manifesto asked, we get the social value review, we get social enterprises being recognised as able to deal with some very complex and challenging problems that we've got in our society. That, I think, is the next big challenge for us. For me personally, I think that the biggest challenges that face us are all now interdepartmental. They're not susceptible to a particular fix by a particular intervention. They need to have a collaborative kind of approach. 10 years ago when I was in the Cabinet, I said to Gus O'Donnell that the problems we face now, whether it's drug addiction, integrated health and social care, whether it's the problems around housing and how we care for people in appropriate housing, all of those are not susceptible to a single minister and a single minister's budget. And the only way that we'll survive the next few years, in my view, is if the Treasury allocates interdependent budgets to different cabinet members, and their success is dependent on collaboration with each other. Wouldn't that be a change? Instead of being judged by how big your bill is and how big your budget is, and sometimes even how big you are, as I've been in cabinet and been the smallest person in cabinet, then it would be good to be judged on how effective are you at collaborating, how good is your teamwork, how good is your inclusive leadership, how good is your working with your stakeholders and your sector, and wouldn't it be good to have some measures about people's political success based on that, and some systems incentive that drives that kind of collaborative behaviour. We have said that to local government, and how many people in local government now have thematic policy briefs? They have to collaborate with each other. There is no money. And Gus O'Donnell said to me, Hazel, you're absolutely right. He said, but it'll never happen because you've got perm secs and you've got cabinet ministers who obviously want to do big things and have big egos. And I am delighted now, as I understand it, I'm not saying this is necessarily going to be happening, but sometimes it's best to say it when you know it, that I understand that there is significant interest at the top of government to look at interdependent budgets following the election. And I know that some of the meetings that have gone on between opposition parties as well as government party with the machinery of Whitehall is looking very actively indeed at driving collaboration in this way. Now, if that happens, then the possibilities for the input of social enterprises, different organisations, being part of that, what I would call alliance contracting, which is now beginning to emerge as a system of contracting which drives collaborative behaviour. And I'll just give you one quick example. It would be in my city, wouldn't it? Because that's where I've got every bit of my practice in the last 30 years. I'm a politician who doesn't believe in talking unless you can do it on the ground. We have just signed an alliance contract for my health and social care system in Salford. £25 million from the local authority for social care, £75 million from the CCG for NHS care. It's in the context of the first alliance contract, as far as I know, signed off in the country, which instead of having prime contractors and subcontractors and then voluntary organisations getting the crumbs off the floor, everybody has parity of esteem, everybody's responsible for delivery. If anything goes wrong, everybody's responsible for mistakes. Nobody takes part in a blame culture, and all the incentives in the contractual framework drive a different kind of behaviour. We're looking at bringing together the whole of our health and social care, not with mergers, but with a governance framework work, which is about ethics, standards and professionalism. It's the most exciting thing I've seen in my life, and social enterprises and the voluntary sector will be at the heart of making that happen. It's called an integrated care organisation. It probably will be the first in the country, but it's the model for me for the future of the whole of the NHS and social care. New Zealand and Australia have rebuilt their health system on the back of alliance contracting, but there's also alliance contracting now in building. You'll know from Wilmot Dixon, some of the big construction companies, Carillion, Kier, they're all talking now about alliance contracting for massive regeneration because it drives and incentivises a different kind of collaborative behaviour. Now, I'm not making this up. If I come back to my first point, I'm really not making this up. And I have to pinch myself sometimes to think about it. But if you think where we're going on all of this, it's big stuff, isn't it? But it's big stuff informed by the little stuff. Because the little stuff we do is about people. It's about relationships. It's about passion. It's about believing you can make a difference. If you can translate those small things, which are not really small things, but those relationships and the small bits of creativity and innovation, you translate those into a big system by collaborating with other people, then you are incredibly powerful. You are really incredible, powerful agents for change. And I think that if we can get every business to be a social business, to have a social mission at the heart of what they do, and if we get every social enterprise and voluntary organisation to be slightly more rigorous, so in some cases, not in every case, but in some cases, and just to have that sense about outcomes and delivery, and really being able to evidence what we do and prove that what we do makes a difference, then that kind of synergy for me is just the most powerful combination that I could ever envisage, because that's when you get a social economy. That's when you get responsible capitalism. That's when you get doing good is good business. And you have the power of change and the energy of change. And we now have some pretty well-established social enterprises in this country, quite big scale, able to deliver on a big public service platform with the experience that we've had. What we've not had to date is a fair playing field to enable us to get onto that platform and to be able to deliver. And I believe that where we go in the future needs to give us that fair and equal platform to prove absolutely what we can do. But I honestly believe that we don't have to compete against some of the good businesses that want to be part of this. I believe that we can work together. And I suppose really the way that I feel is that most of the things that have succeeded in my political life have been about where you bring people together, they learn from each other, and what comes out of it is slightly different than what went in. Now, if you were a Marxist, you'd call that a dialectic, and you'd have a synthesis and a thesis and a synthesis, a thesis, can't you say? Thesis and an antithesis and a synthesis. I am not a Marxist and I'm not a dialectic, but I absolutely believe that if you bring people together from different points of view, then very often the sum of what you achieve is more than you ever expected to have. And when I was the police minister, quite a few years ago now, I used to get very, very frustrated with people. And I used to say, do you know, if social workers were more like cops and cops were more like social workers, don't you think we'd be getting somewhere? And eventually, with neighbourhood policing and some of the respect to gender and stuff that we actually did get people thinking in a much more collaborative and kind of synergistic way. And out of that, we got something that sustained this country. I think neighbourhood policing now will be here to stay, whatever government is in power, because it's about building on relationships and valuing people's different contribution. So I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me here this afternoon, yet again in Coin Street. Don't know if you can feel it, but I can. And isn't it powerful? Isn't it amazing? So let's come back perhaps in a year's time after the election, see where we are, see where we've got to, see the progress that we're making. But don't ever, ever, ever for a minute think that we're not on some absolutely fabulous journey. And we're going to build a social economy in this country that not just we'll be proud of, but Europe will be proud of and the world will be proud of. Thank you.
I'll be extremely brief, partly because that's impossible to follow, obviously. So huge thanks to Hazel. I mean, your kind of leadership within the House of Commons will be missed, but I know that the energy and passion and the advocacy and everything else will remain outside. So look forward to continuing to work with you on that. I will just have a few brief thanks, because I have to, because there's lots of people involved in making this event a success. A big thank you to Interserve, our partners on this event, particularly Matt Roberts, but also Tim Hayward and Adrian Ringrose for their support. Thank you to CoinStreet, a great host and a great social enterprise. To Fuse, our event management team, also a social enterprise. You can see where I'm going with this. Thanks especially to Sarah Whitehead, who has been utterly amazing while heavily pregnant in making this event happen. Thank you to all our speakers and panelists for their time and contribution. And thank you finally to all of you. I should have said thank you to Bubble, who've done all the tech stuff. This is the first time CoinStreet has, I believe, live streamed anything, but certainly live streamed about 12 different sessions at the same time and on the same day. So please catch up on the videos of the sessions you weren't able to be in later. Thank you to all of you. I mean, I think as Hazel said, we've done a huge amount actually, and we've come a long way, but there is a hell of a lot more to do and achieve. Ultimately, this is, for us at SE UK and for all of you, I think it's about making a difference on the ground to people's lives and the communities in which they live and work. And we're going to keep kind of laser focused on that and working with you on that, and look forward to working with all of you to create more social value in the future. So thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.